with R's Garage. In this video, I'll be working on the Yokomo RD 1.0, the rookie drift, steps 4 through 6, the gearbox assembly. So let's get started. So we're going to need the chassis, our differential, the motor of your choice. Right now I'm just going to use this motor I pulled out of one of my bashers, and bag 4. I believe we're also going to need an item from bag 1 and from the screw bags as well. Alright, so we're going to need our gearbox halves. So I'm going to go ahead and just take all these off the parts tree and trim any excess plastic so it's nice and clean. Alright, so we're going to need our bearings, and we're going to open up this bag as well because we're going to need the top shaft and the idler gear. So this is our idler gear. We're going to need, looks like 2 5 by 10 by 4 bearings. Some nice quality bearings, they're metal shielded. So I'm going to use my bearing tool to install my bearings. So there's 2 gearbox halves. So we're going to use this particular one that has this long section here for the top shaft. So we're going to install another 5 by 10 by 4 bearing on the top shaft, just like so. And we're going to insert this into the long section hole, like so. Next, we're going to install our idler shaft through our idler gear and bearings. And it's going to sit just like so. Next, we're going to install our other 5 by 10 by 4 bearing on the top shaft, like so. And then install our other half of the gearbox. So it doesn't say to install or apply any grease on here. A lot of the other high-end Yokomo kits don't have grease on their gears, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave it like that. So there we go. Everything moves nice and free. That's what you want. So now we're going to need 4 M3 by 12 button head screws and 2 M3 by 15 button head screws. So I'm going to go ahead and grab those. So the 4 M3 by 12 screws are going to install in these holes. And the 2 M3 by 15 screws are going to install in these 2 holes. Okay, so everything's tight. Everything still moves nice and free. So we can go ahead and continue. So that was step 4 of the gearbox assembly. So step 5 of the gearbox assembly is to install the differential itself. So we can use the 2 10 by 15 bearings. So go ahead and slide those on. And from the image, it looks like the screw heads will be opposite of the top shaft. So it's going to install like so. So my screw heads are on this side of the top shaft. Next we can install our gearbox cap, and it's just going to install like so. And it's going to install using 4 M3 by 8 button head screws. And the 4 screws are going to install in these 4 holes. Everything moves nice and free. Doesn't feel like there's any binding or anything. So we can go ahead and continue. So there's an option to install in a high mount position and a low mount position. I'm going to start off with the low mount position and then learn my way up to using a high mount. So we're going to need the rear brace, which is actually in bag 1. So this is bag 1, the rear brace is right here. So we have our brace and we're going to install it in this fashion here. This is going to be the top shaft right here. This mount is going to install like so. And we have our mount pin, which is going to install through the mount and the gearbox. And to secure the pin into place, we're going to use an M2 by 4 button head screw. So we're going to install the screw right next to the pin, and it's going to prevent it from coming out. It can't come out the other end because the hole's not big enough. So now we can install the motor plate. So we're going to install the motor plate in, looks like the screws are going to go in these 3 holes here. And those 3 screws are M3 by 12, so I'm going to go ahead and grab those. So I'm going to use the low mount position. So this motor mount is going to install like so. And these holes here are drilled out to have individual spots. So you have individual adjustments of where it can be. So in the manual it says if you're using the low mount, the pinion gear can be installed up to 24 teeth in holes 1 and 4. So I'm going to go with the lowest position, which is going to be 1. So if you were to install in the high mount position, this brace is actually flipped, and then the motor mount still uses the same orientation, but you just use it like so. Okay, so we're going to do the low mount. So we have it here, and I'm just going to use the lowest position possible. So the motor plate is on now. There we go. So now we can install our spur gear hub and spur gear onto the top shaft. So be careful when opening this up. You have your spur gear and you also have your drive pin. You don't want to lose that drive pin since it is pretty small. So we're going to get the spur gear and hub put together first, and then we'll install it onto the top shaft. So we're going to need 4 M3x6 button head screws. Okay, so you want to check the orientation when you install this. There's a slot on one side and no slot on the other. So make sure you put the slot on the opposite side of the spur gear. It's a pretty snug fit, and the holes line up perfectly, so we can go ahead and install our screws. And it is going into aluminum, but I don't think there's going to be enough vibration for this to come undone, so I'm not going to install any Loctite on here. So I'm just going to tighten it up in a crisscross pattern. So now we can install our drive pin in the hole in the top shaft. See right there. So I'm going to make sure that this flat that we have right here is facing up. I'm going to go ahead and install the drive pin. So I have the drive pin installed. The flat is facing up. Now on the spur gear hub, you have that flat that's cut out. You want to line that up with the pin and slide it on. And additionally, there's a thread on one side. So you want to make sure you face that up and it's facing the flat. So once you have this lined up, we can install a M3x4 set screw in that hole. So let me go ahead and grab that. Everything moves nice and free like it should. So that's the end of step 5 gearbox assembly. We can move on to step 6 of the gearbox assembly, which is going to be installing the gearbox assembly onto the chassis itself. So we're going to need 2 M3x10 button head cap screws and 4 M3x10 flathead screws. So let me go ahead and grab those. So when installing in the low mount position, the M3x10 screws are going to go in these two holes, here and here, and install here and here. If you're going to install in the top mount position where this brace is flipped, then it actually installs the screws installed in these two holes and go in here. Additionally, the rear gearbox assembly is going to install in these 4 holes using the flathead screws. Alright, everything still moves nice and free. So the gearbox is now attached to the chassis, and now we can install the motor onto the motor plate. So we're going to need 2 M3x6 button head screws along with 2 3x7 washers. So let me go ahead and get those. Okay. So it doesn't say to, but I will apply some blue Loctite to these screws. since they are holding the motor on. So probably going to install like so, trying to see where my screws line up. So it looks like the tabs will be facing straight up. Okay. So I left the motor screws a little loose so I can install the pinion and get it adjusted. So it's nice that they include the pinion. It's a 24 tooth pinion that they include. And we're gonna need an M3 by 3 set screw in order to install it. So the pinion is on. Now I can just set my mesh. And I got my mesh set just the way I like it. So there we go. Not sure if I'm gonna keep these wires yet or if I'm gonna cut them shorter or put some new wires in, but for now, it is what it is. So that's it for steps 4 through 6, the gearbox assembly. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did. Let me know down in the comments if you had any issues, comments, and I will do my best to reply if I can. Stay tuned for the next video, which is going to be the servo installation, step 7. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.